Hi, I'm Ken Harbaugh, former U.S. Navy pilot and host of Warriors in Their Own Words. Our mission here is simple: to preserve stories of service and sacrifice from America's warriors. Through archival interviews with veterans from World War II up through modern day conflicts, we present firsthand accounts of what it takes to defend a nation. This is the unvarnished, unsanitized truth from those who lived it. This is Warriors in Their Own Words.
You're scared all the time. If you know you're going over in the morning, you sleep fitfully because you know that this could be your last night on earth as a mortal. You really feel that way. You really think maybe this is my time. And as I say, your stomach is in butterflies, and if you're not scared, you're in trouble.
Today, in the first of a two-part episode of Warriors in Their Own Words, we'll hear from Lieutenant Colonel Winston Roche. He served in the U.S. Army during World War I, including 12 months of combat in the trenches on the Western Front.
I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel Winston M. Roche of the United States Army 7th Engineers of the 5th Division, Regular Division. I'm 93 years old, and I served in World War I for over 22 months. And then when I came out after the armistice, I enlisted in the National Guard and retired in 1943.
Winston Roche began his training patrolling the southern border of the United States.
All we had were a few regulars who were on the Mexican border fighting the Mexican bandits who were continually sniping at Texas and those border states. And I suppose that they had desires on getting California and the West Coast back into their hands, but they were rebels and they never lasted long. They just were a continued nuisance. They would come in over the border. And I served in the last portions of the famous 7th Cavalry organization that was on the border under John J. Pershing, who later became the commanding general of all World War I troops. And I think he was the first 5-star general that we had. But basically, it was a real citizens' army, and it was composed mostly of young men, in their teens, up to 25 or so, that were in business, school, or just graduating from school, and on the farms. So we were a clean, innocent bunch of kids, and we had to be trained completely. We knew nothing about warfare. We had no radio, we had no TV, we had never heard of these kind of things. And so you get an idea of what you as if you were an old experienced cavalryman from the border, and you saw me coming down there with my fresh new khaki uniform and my big wide-brimmed hat, a 17-year-old kid, and you were supposed to put me in your unit? What the hell do you think you would think about putting this guy in there as a cavalryman? Of course, I could ride a horse. I was raised on a farm, but I knew nothing about horse cavalry warfare. So it's just the background of what the officers faced, the terrific job that they had ahead of them to train us and bring us up to a stature that would withstand modern warfare. And they, of course, knew a hell of a lot more than we did about what we were going to face in France. Now, that war had been going on since 1914, and we didn't go in until April the 6th, 1917. And I went in late May in 17. And the only thing we knew were the things that we read in the newspapers and the magazines that we had. So naturally we were aggressive, cocky, well-protected kids. We all had been brought up by good families. We went to church. All of my friends went to church. I still go, I just came home from church. And we had ideal boyhoods. We had all the things, swimming holes and everything, nothing technologically advanced or anything like that. We had the telephones that you rang at the, turned the bell on to talk through and stuff like that. Our movie theaters, all of the pictures were accompanied by a pianist. And so when the action got wild and furious on the cowboys and Indians or the soldiers and Indians, the pianist would go into some rock and rolling deal and make a lot of noise and try to raise your excitement, and he'd be banging on the little piano, and this would affect us. This would instill in us the desire to get on one of those horses and chase those Indians and get into the fray. Then the magazines would carry once in a while pictures, wonderful pictures drawn by artists of the action on the Western Front. And you show the dashing cavalrymen or the beautiful white black horses chasing the enemy with their sabers flashing in the sun. And this all had a terrific impact on me. And I saw myself on one of those horses chasing after the dirty Huns and driving them back to Germany. And we heard about the atrocities that they would pillage and rape the women in the villages and kill the kids and stuff like that. Sensationalism that the media in those days lived on that, just like I think most of them do now. It's sensational. That takes precedence over something good. I enlisted right after getting out of high school. By permission of my daddy, he wrote a letter to the commandant here in the old Pacific Electric building on 6th and Main Streets, and he put him to work as the superintendent of the street maintenance department. So naturally he was in politics. All politicians having sons wanted a boy in the Army or the Navy. And so I got his permission, and that's how I got in. And I was sent to San Francisco, Angel Island, through the Presidio. Out to Angel Island, got my uniform and everything. Then I was sent from there down to Camp Houston in San Antonio, Texas. And there I was transferred to the early Air Force. That, of course, I didn't dream of any Air Force activity because we didn't have an Air Force. And I, of course, had seen the pictures of the daring young men in their flying machines and their dogfights and all that stuff, but it never dawned on me until I was transferred to the Air Force, and I learned at Kelly Field there, adjacent to Camp Upton. I was sent to be an aviator. So I qualified in JN4 Jennies, and with the OX5 engine in them, famous Curtiss engine. I soloed it in Jennies in 1917. Oh yeah. And later on they imported some Spads and Newports and some DH4s, the de Havilland, and I also qualified in the de Havillands. That was an observation aircraft, a big biplane, bigger than the Jenny, and it was more sophisticated. It was an English aircraft, and the English and the French by this time had some good airplanes, the Spad Newports. English had the Bristol 5s and the Sopwith Camels, and so they were way ahead of us. We were just kindergarten and everything, and I loved it. And I've flown DC-3s and stuff like that later on when I came home. Yeah, I love to fly. And then when, as I say, when they got to the point where they got enough organized to find out that I was a mathematician, even at that age, 17, that I was specializing in mathematics in school. I had a bent for math, so they just arbitrarily transferred me to the engineers. So I went where I was told. I became a trainee, engineer trainee. We had earthworks trenches at the camp in Texas, in San Antonio, and we learned how to build trenches and fire steps and how to build them out of nothing, just dig them up out of the dirt and get support. And we had to in those days. It was dig a hole was one of the first things you learned to do. And so I progressed on through, and of course I was in France 30 days after I enlisted here. I was 3,000 miles from home in 30 days. The last thing my dad told me, said, be a good soldier. So I, being a good kid, I minded him. And all through the war, I remember what my dad told me, be a good soldier. And I was. When I got to France, I knew nothing yet. We went to training camps right away the minute we hit French soil. It took us 14 days to cross in a 13-ship convoy. Didn't lose any. We got across okay. And we landed, in fact, we landed at Liverpool first and trained at Winchester for a while with the British troops. And then we were sent, and I landed at Le Havre. And that was an all-night trip across that channel in those days. Vicious trip. I got my training mostly in France, and of course I was working with French troops because we had no American training camps there yet. And I trained with 2 different French divisions, and I served under Marshal Giraud, and I served under Pétain, P-E-T-A-I-N, and of course under the direction of Joffre, Marshal Joffre, we used to call him. And most of my instruction came from French and British officers. I had no arms when I left here. We had some few rifles, and we had some Colt automatics. So we learned how to shoot, but we all, farm kids, we all knew how to shoot. I was a good marksman. I used to hunt ducks when I was 8, 9 years old. You had to back in those days. In my entire point of action with the American Army, I never saw the beauty of France. Everything I went through, the path that I took, being in a combat division, all the towns we went through were devastated. There were just huts, standing bare walls. All the fields were shot up. The forests we went through were mostly just bare trunks towering into the sky with all the leaves shot off, most of the branches shot off. And so to us, France was a completely devastated country. When we went into action, the first action, we would be sent up to the line with nothing but our sidearm and our trench knives as observers. And we would go along with the British or the French, whichever we were assigned to, and we would watch them. And we didn't participate unless we were attacked. Of course, then we would do our best to shoot at the enemy. But we were students, actually, learning how to build redoubts and trenches and observation trenches. We had to build a trench in a zigzag manner because you could, if it was overrun by the enemy, they couldn't just stand in one spot and spray for 100 yards in each direction, kill everybody they could see. The trenches had to have what they call observation trenches. Now, the observation trench is a thin, narrow, one-man style of highway out into no man's land. You would dig under the wire, and so they have two men out there. And of course, remember I told you we had no radio, nothing like that. So one of the men on the observation trench, we were equipped with flares, white and red flares. And there'd be a man out there standing guard, because no man's land at night was a jungle, just like the streets of LA are. And you could be set upon any moment from raiding parties. It's in a group of 10 troops out, so the enemy, and they would try to take a prisoner, to get into our sector and get a prisoner or two and take them back with them and get some information. And so we had two men in these observation trenches, went out every so many hundreds of yards. There'd be an observation trench out there. And one man would get the information, try to make an estimation on how many there were in the raiding party, and we'd get back, one man to go back, run back through the trench to the main dugout and tell them what was going on, and then they'd have a soldier from the nearest supporting observation point shoot a flare so as not to disturb these people in front of us, if you get what I mean, because the action was in our area. And when that flare went off, the second or third one down on the other side would shoot a flare up to light up no man's land so we could zero in on this raiding party. And there was some vicious hand-to-hand combat out there in the dark sometime when you couldn't see much more than 10 feet or so from the black night, or maybe it might be raining. To talk about combat and tell you what it's like is impossible. Think for a moment, how would you feel if I told you now and there was someone in my driveway who was threatening us, and I gave you one of my old trench knives and told you to go out there and stick this guy if he had to be stuck. If he wouldn't leave, stick him in the stomach. This knife's about that long. See? It's you don't think about killing a man per se, and that killing him. My reactions was just an object. There was a dark object out there right in front of me, and I had to pump 2 or 3 shots into it, which I did because I didn't think that I couldn't stop and think I might be killing some father or son. You can't think about those things. It's either him or you. That's the overriding, that's the main thing that kept me going when I got into, I had some vicious hand-to-hand combat, and by this time I was a man. I wasn't a kid anymore. You grow up overnight when you're under fire, where in a situation with these crashing shells all around you, and the constant noise, the misery, the uncomfortableness. You're either always sleepy as hell, hungry, or tired. You're in the Army, you never get to feel good. At least you don't in combat. So to talk about and think about killing a man, you don't. You just do your job and take care of the enemy to keep him from getting you or your buddies. And that's it. That's the way it works. So you got to go after him and do it first. You got to be aggressive. And if you want to look at it that way, mean. And you adopt an attitude, a fatalistic attitude of you don't know whether you're going to be here tomorrow or not. And so you live for today. You never make any plans. And we also we were instructed, try not to make too good a friendship with. Be friendly to everybody, of course, and cooperative, but don't make any, if you can help it, don't make anybody buddy, because you might be transferred the next day, one of you, or you might be killed. So then you'd be devastated and you wouldn't be a good soldier anymore. You have to be a professional. You have to learn that it's either him or you. And that will sustain you. And then you have your own private thoughts of your home, your loved ones, the wonderful comforts you've left behind. And it gets to the point, if you've been there 6 or 8 months in almost constant action and this continual deafening noise, you can't believe how this affects you. Now, you've heard of PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome from Vietnam. Okay, I know what they mean. What they're talking about is shell shock. And we had it in gobs in World War I. I had 2 bad attacks of it, and it affected my nerves. And well, you can see I've been like this ever since I came out of the Army. And this is post-traumatic syndrome, and it's a big deal in Vietnam. We came home with no treatment whatsoever for it, but that's another story. So we had everything, and we were taken in like a bunch of city kids by a bunch of slick gamblers, by the vicissitudes of war, in the French villages, when we'd have to be withdrawn to replace our casualties, to replace our ammunition, to replace a lost gas mask or something. The troops would be besieged by the French women, young and old. There were no Frenchmen in the villages, the little villages. And as the front moved, they would come back to their homes and try to pick up life before they were driven out. That's a homing instinct that all of you have. And everybody wants to go home sooner or later. I was no angel by any means, but I was a good kid. I remember what my dad told me, like I told you a long time ago, about be a good soldier. And I had seen many of my comrades put up against the firing squad for deserting a post under fire or some other action that they engaged in detrimental to the safety of the Army. So I've seen my own people executed. When you're in the trenches, you're living in this special world, a soldier's world, where nothing matters but survival. And as I pointed out, they always say you don't ever have to worry about the bullet that's going to hit you because you never hear it. And if it kills you, it kills you. You have to be a fatalist. And you get so used to the buzzing of bullets, the explosions of shells, and the funny zinging sound of a mortar coming at you. And those were the things that were every day, just like going out and having breakfast. When you come out of the dugout or from wherever you were sleeping, you're back into your world. You felt comfortable. Actually, you felt comfortable. Of course, now I don't mean to give the impression that we were happy to be there, but this is what we had to do, and we knew we were going to be there until we were either wounded or killed or the war stopped. So, this is your life, and you take it for granted, and you're ducking bullets all the time. Just inadvertently, you duck when you hear one buzzing pretty close to your head. Of course, it's long gone. Hits something or it's gone on its way. And the same thing applies to you when you get the word that we're going over. Now we sometime were in the first wave that went over because we had to lead and snip the wire to be damn sure our guys had a way to get through, and we also had to do police duty on watching back to see if there's anybody got hung up who was a stationary target. We had to go back. That was our job, to go back and get him loose. The rest of the troops were on their way to combat. They had to keep going ahead. You're scared all the time. If you know you're going over in the morning, you sleep fitfully because you know that this could be your last night on earth as a mortal. You really feel that way. You really think maybe this is my time. And as I say, your stomach is in butterflies and If you're not scared, you're in trouble. There's something wrong with you, because, boy, you better be scared, and you better duck, and you better hit those shell holes when you get a chance. It's like, just like trying to tell you how good a good glass of beer is on a hot day. You can't explain it, you have to be there.
That was World War I veteran Lieutenant Colonel Winston Roche. We'll hear more from him in the next episode of Warriors in Their Own Words. Warriors in Their Own Words is our attempt to present an unvarnished, unsanitized truth of what we have asked of those who defend this nation. Thank you for watching, and by doing so, honoring those who've served. This program was produced by Evergreen Podcasts and Documentary.tv. I'm your host, Ken Harbaugh. If you've enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe below.